Legendary Pokemon are some of the most important Pokemon in each game, but at this point, there are so many that it can be hard to remember the important details for each one, like their lore, inspiration, and more. Well, worry not, as that is exactly what we're covering here today, as we explain every legendary Pokemon. We'll be going in Pokédex order, with a few exceptions for legendaries that were introduced at different times than the rest of their groups, such as Enamorus. Let's get started with the legendary birds. These guys were the OG legendaries, and I think their designs have aged pretty well overall, even if their usefulness in battle kind of hasn't. The first of these three entities is Articuno. Being such an old legendary, the dex entries for this Pokemon have changed quite a bit over the years, but the common consensus seems to be that Articuno has the ability to cool the air around it, turning it into snow and summoning blizzards. It is said that Articuno's wings are made of ice themselves, which might explain how it cools the air. Articuno also apparently appears to doomed hikers on mountains, which is pretty bleak. But I mean, if I was stranded on a mountain about to die, seeing this magnificent beast would at least be a silver lining. Articuno also has a Galarian form, as do all the other legendary birds, but because it was introduced so recently, we don't have nearly as much information on it. It apparently still has the ability to freeze things via its freezing glare, and it supposedly keeps itself afloat with its psychic powers despite still being a flying type. The second member of the legendary birds is the likely fan favorite, Zapdos. Inspired primarily by the Thunderbird, Zapdos lives in thunder clouds, and it has the ability to control electricity. It is most commonly seen when thunderclouds split in half. Interestingly, its Pokemon Stadium Dex entry claims it can actually summon thunderstorms by flapping its wings, but most other Dex entries say it simply lives in them. Its Galarian form is flying fighting rather than flying electric, and in this form, it mostly just wants to throw hands. It is far more muscular than Cantonian Zapdos despite being smaller, and its legs are also a lot stronger, as they're able to deliver kicks that can destroy dump trucks. This form, I believe, is inspired by the Roadrunner. And the final member of the trio is Moltres, which is a flying fire type. The most obvious inspiration for Moltres is, of course, the Phoenix, although it does get overshadowed by Ho-Oh in that department, and frankly, pretty much every other department. Sorry, Moltres. A lot of Moltres' early dex entries mention that it has the ability to dip its body into lava if it needs to heal, which really emphasizes the molten part of its name, but this idea seems to have been replaced by the idea that it brings spring in later dex entries. In fact, all three of the legendary birds are supposed to represent the coming of a new season, with Zapdos representing summer and the thunderstorms characteristic of summer, and Articuno obviously representing the winter. Autumn is not outright represented, which just makes it all the more interesting just how connected Autumn is to Ho-Oh. And before you leave that comment, no, there is no connection between the legendary birds and the Lugia like there was in the Pokemon 2000 movie. That was purely a construct of the movie, but we'll be talking more about Lugia's weird history in its designated slot. Galarian Moltres seems to just be Moltres, but evil. Its flames are sinister, and its victims become burned out shadows of themselves. I wonder where that idea came from. The last thing I should mention about the legendary birds is that their names are all partially constructed of Spanish numbers. Articuno, Zapdos, Moltres. I'm sure you already knew this, but in case you didn't, there you go. Now it's time to talk about Mewtwo. Mewtwo is a human-made Pokemon that was created to push the bounds of genetic engineering and create the strongest Pokemon humanly possible. In this, the scientists who created Mewtwo, likely Dr. Fuji and Blaine, were successful. They rearranged the DNA gathered from the Pokemon Mew, engineering it to try and increase the strength of their creations. As Mewtwo became stronger though, it lost empathy and started to focus solely on battle. Eventually, Mewtwo escaped the facility it was kept in on Cinnabar Island and fled to Cerulean Cave, where it now rests. While it is implied by the games that only one Mewtwo was created, both the anime and manga now imply that there are multiple. Regardless of how many there are, Mewtwo stands among the most popular Pokemon even to this day, in large part because it was just such a good character in the first Pokemon movie. And the final Kanto legendary is Mew. Mew technically isn't a legendary, but a mythical Pokemon. But guess what? We're talking about the mythicals in this video too. That's right, we're not leaving any legendaries behind. Well, maybe Fione. Anyway, when it was originally introduced, Mew was the first Pokemon. It is believed to be the common ancestor of all Pokemon, as the genetic code for all Pokemon exists within its DNA. This is what gives Mew the ability to learn so many moves, and is also the reason it is one of the few Pokemon that can learn Transform. It was originally discovered by Mr. Fuji in South America, who then took it back to the Kanto region to experiment on it, as we already stated. There's a popular fan theory that the Pokemon Ditto is actually a byproduct of failed experiments on Mew, as the two Pokemon have a high number of shared stats, like being the same weight, having identical sprite and shiny colors, and being able to learn Transform, which is an extraordinarily rare move otherwise. Another interesting tidbit about Mew is that apparently not even Nintendo knew it was in the game when Red and Green originally came out, as Shigeki Morimoto added it after the debugging process was done just 2 weeks before the game's released. It is wild that a Pokemon as iconic and important as Mew almost didn't make it into the original games, but that does also explain why it was absent from a lot of promotional material like the Pokerap. Now though, it's time to move to Johto, which actually has some pretty cool legendary Pokemon. That's not to say Kanto's legendaries aren't cool, but I feel like a lot of people sleep on Johto when it comes to legendaries for whatever reason. Let's start with the legendary beasts. These 3 beasts have some of the most memorable lore in Pokemon. One night, the Brass Tower was set ablaze by a thunderstorm and burned to the ground. Trapped inside were 3 Pokemon, all of whom ended up perishing in the fire. However, after the fire subsided, Ho-Oh appeared and not only resurrected them, but also turned them into the legendary Pokemon Suicuine, Raikou, and Entei. It's a simple but very mythological story, and it's some of my favorite lore in Pokemon. But there's more to say about these beasts than just what made them legendary. At least that's the case for Entei and Suicuine. Raikou kind of got the short end of the stick, and you'll soon understand why I say that. Raikou is the electric type member of the legendary beasts, and it is supposed to represent the lightning that set the tower on fire. The rain cloud it carries on its back can release thunderbolts at will, and its roar sends shockwaves through the air and sounds of thunder. It seems to be inspired by a Raijin, a Japanese god of lightning, but could also be inspired by the Nue. Apparently, Raikou went through a lot of different tiger-based design concepts over the course of its creation, which could be why it seems so much less prevalent outside of the games when compared to Entei and Suicuine. Entei is said to represent the fire that burned the tower down, and while the one we know from Gold and Silver was created through resurrection, apparently they can also be born from volcanic eruptions too, according to their dex entries. The Pokedex also says Entei embodies the passion of magma and that volcanoes erupt when it barks, which is a very interesting reproductive cycle. Like, if an Entei gets pissed at another Pokemon and barks up a storm, will that just birth a bunch of Entei via volcanic eruptions? If that were the case, I feel like there'd be way more of them, you know? Anyway, much like Raikou, Entei seems to be inspired by a big cat as well, this time a lion. From a mythological perspective, it was likely also inspired by the lion dogs of China. Entei was also featured as the main antagonist of the 3rd Pokemon movie, Spell of the Unknown, although technically this wasn't a real Entei, just an illusion created by the Unknown. And finally, we have the fan favorite, or at least the Pokemon Company's favorite, Suicuine. Suicuine represents the rain that put out the fire that burnt down the Brass Tower, and it is said to be the reincarnation of the northern winds. It runs gracefully across the lands and has the ability to purify water instantly, and was apparently popular enough to become the mascot of Pokemon Crystal, which is pretty cool since it's the only time a member of a lesser legendary trio has appeared as a mascot. In Crystal, Suicuine makes periodic appearances throughout your journey across Johto and almost seems to be watching or following you to some extent before you catch it in the Tin Tower. Interestingly, the routes and locations it appears are different in the remakes, as it travels around Kanto quite a bit as well in those games. Suicuine also played a large role in the 4th Pokemon movie along with Celebi, who we'll talk about in a little bit. So with Entei getting its own movie and Suicuine getting its own game and having a major role in a movie, hopefully you understand why I say Raikou got the short end of the stick. Maybe that's why they decided to make Raging Bolt such a monster of a Pokemon. All 3 of the legendary beasts actually got past Paradox forms in Scarlet and Violet, with Entei's being Gouging Fire and Suicuine's being Walking Wake. But we don't have have much information on these three on account of them being so brand new. All three of their Pokedex entries have emphases on just how strong and ruthless they are, which makes sense as they are all based on different kinds of dinosaurs. But enough of that legendary trio, let's move on to Lugia. Lugia is one of the most fascinating Pokemon to me because it was never supposed to exist. Okay, let me explain. Lugia was originally designed for the second Pokemon movie rather than Gold and Silver. Originally, Ho-Oh was supposed to be the sole legendary of the Johto region, but Lugia was added at a later date, as we can see in the 1999 demo. The original designer of Lugia, Takeshi Shudo, saw the Pokemon as a maternal figure and wrote them to be the creator of all life on Earth. But this was later changed by another party, and the Pokemon was made the guardian of the sea instead and given a more male representation with a male voice in the movie, which the original creator disagreed with and regretted. While we're talking about Pokemon the movie 2000, I want to reiterate that Lugia has no actual connection to the legendary birds in lore, despite it being portrayed that way in the film. So if you didn't know that, sorry to burst your bubble. Lugia's Dex entries corroborate it being the guardian of the sea, but also put a huge emphasis on just how strong its wings are, stating that just one flap can cause a storm that lasts 40 days, and even a light flutter of its wings can destroy houses. However, unlike a different sea-based deity, Lugia does not want to be destructive, so instead it sleeps deep underwater. Lugia also got a fairly cool redesign in Pokemon XD Gales of Darkness, where it became Shadow Lugia, the ultimate shadow Pokemon. This form is exclusive to this game though, and it is impossible to transfer it out without first purifying it. Next is Ho-Oh. Ho-Oh is undoubtedly one of the most important Pokemon to the early days of the franchise. Not only did it appear in the very first episode of the Pokemon anime, but as we established earlier, it is also central to the creation of the legendary beasts, and at one point in development might have even held a connection to the legendary birds, as it seems to be closely related to autumn, which is the one season that is missing from their pattern. Ho-Oh is said to constantly fly around the world on its magnificent wings, granting any who see it eternal happiness and good fortune. It also, obviously, has the ability to bring beings back from the dead, although we don't know exactly how this works. It's likely that the item Sacred Ash is involved, as Sacred Ash is an item that is held by Ho-Oh that can revive up to 5 Pokemon at a time in-game, but this item does not make new legendary Pokemon like Ho-Oh did in that moment. Regardless, the inspiration for Ho-Oh could not be more obvious. It's the Phoenix, more specifically Feng Wang in the Huma. The Huma specifically is seen as a symbol of good fortune, which matches up pretty well with Ho-Oh's Dex entry. And the final legendary Pokemon of the Johto region is everybody's favorite time-traveling onion fairy, Celebi. Celebi was the first Pokemon able to time travel, excluding fossils if you want to count that as time travel, which I guess it kind of is, but I digress. It is said that Celebi wanders across time, causing grass and flowers to flourish when it appears. However, it only appears in times of peace. Its Pokedex entry says that it protects the forest, which I think is implied to mean Ilex, but since the Gen 2 games, we have seen it appear periodically in other forests as well. So there's a good chance that the forest it refers to is dependent on the region that it is in. Celebi also plays a huge role in the 4th Pokemon movie, Celebi, the Voice of the Forest. And it is also tied to the infamous GS Ball plotline of the anime, as it was originally supposed to be contained within the GS Ball before the whole arc was thrown out and the GS Ball with it. And now we move to one of my personal favorite regions, the Hoenn region. Hoenn was the first region I ever played, and as such it holds a special place in my heart. In my opinion, it has some of the coolest legendary designs, with many of them inspiring a feeling of awe or wonder in a way that not a ton of legendaries do. We'll be starting with the legendary golems, or giants, or Regis. The golems are interesting because they're one of the few groups of legendaries that has expanded over time, with new members being added on 2 separate occasions. For now though, we're just gonna stay focused on the OG3, Regirock, Regice, and Registeel. Aside from the funny noises these guys make in the movies, this trio is known primarily for their insanely cryptic and overly complicated methods of obtaining, as you have to decode like 4 different braille messages to get each one. It's the type of stuff your friend would tell you on a playground in order to obtain Mew 3, except it's actually in the games. It's wild. In order to unlock Regirock, the player must move either to the right or left 2 tiles, depending on the game, then move down 2 tiles, and then use Strength. Regirock is, in my opinion, the most recognizable of the original trio. According to its dex entries, it was sealed away by people long ago, and it has the ability to repair itself in battle just by picking up rocks that are around it. This kind of makes me wish it had an ability like Ice Body or Rain Dish, but for sand, as that would fit its lore very well. But instead, it just gets Pressure or Sturdy. Another one of its dex entries says that the rocks that make up its body come from all across the world, which is kind of interesting when we add the context of its previous dex entry, because together they kind of imply that prior to its imprisonment, the golem kind of just wandered the earth. Next in the trio is Regice. Regice's defining feature is that it is really, really cold, like negative 328 degrees Fahrenheit, or negative 200 degrees Celsius for all you metric people out there. Its body originally formed way back during the Ice Age, meaning it is at least 11,000 years old, and it is apparently formed out of Antarctic ice. It also cannot be melted by pretty much anything, even magma, so there's definitely some supernatural properties in this golem as well, which I guess makes sense. The puzzle to unlock Regice's chamber differs quite a bit depending on the game. In the original Ruby and Sapphire, as well as the remakes, you have to stand outside the door and wait for 2 minutes for it to open. This does still work if the game's internal battery has dried up, in case you're wondering, as it's based on a recorded in-game time and not the battery timer. In Emerald, you just have to run 1 lap around the room while sticking right next to the wall. I'm not entirely sure why they decided to change this for Emerald, but I kind of like the new updated version more. Waiting 2 minutes is just kind of anxiety-inducing. How do I know if I've waited long enough? Will the door automatically open, or do I have to go press on, oh, there it goes. And finally, we have Registeel. Registeel seems to be the most mysterious of the 3 golems. Its body is composed of a metal that is harder than any known metal, yet somehow it shrinks and stretches with flexibility. Apparently, it was hardened underground by extremely high pressures for tens of thousands of years, meaning it is likely the oldest of the Regis aside from Regigigas. There's a strong possibility the metal actually came to Earth via a meteorite, as its dex entry for Sapphire says the metal is not of this world. While it might sound like a contradiction to say the metal spent tens of thousands of years being tempered underground but also came from space, it is technically possible, just super unlikely. All 3 of the golems were imprisoned by people long ago, but the exact methods are not known to us. Personally, I'd love to see a Legends Hoenn game centered around these sealing events, but I know that's not exactly likely considering this trio is not really the most popular and we already got Hoenn remakes. But we have to move on from the Regis for now, as we have to cover the Lati duo. Latias and Latios are 2 of the most deeply connected legendary Pokemon ever made, to the point that even their Mega Evolutions are similar color-wise. They also share a typing of Dragon and Psychic, and have identical stat spreads with their attacking and defensive stats swapped. They even share an exclusive item in the Soul Dew, which I think is the only time an item like this has 2 exclusive users. Latias is the first of these 2 in the Pokédex and was originally introduced in Sapphire. According to its dex entries, it is extremely intelligent and sensitive to people's emotions. When hostile people or Pokemon come near it, Latias can use the down on its body to become invisible by controlling how it refracts light. Latios, on the other hand, can transmit images into the heads of foes telepathically and is also intelligent enough to understand human speech. The most memorable aspect of Latios, though, is probably the fact that it can apparently outspeed jet planes when it folds its wings. As for inspiration, it's pretty opaque for these 2. One of the more clear inspirations is Eos, the Greek goddess of dawn, as Latios has a similar name, and there's also a blue parrot genus known as the Eos genus, which would match Latios's blue coloring. The duo is also known as the Aeon duo, which could be a reference to the aeons of Gnostic religions, but I do not know nearly enough about religion to talk about that, so let's just move on to the Weather trio. But first, please consider subscribing. If you want more Pokemon content, this is the channel to subscribe to. I have so many cool and unique videos coming in the next few months, and I promise you're not going to want to miss them. Plus, subscribing is just one of the best ways that you can help the channel aside from watching videos, so I would really appreciate if you would subscribe. Anyway, the Weather trio are, arguably, some of the most recognizable and beloved legendary Pokemon. All the members of this trio are so well designed and have kept their relevance in both competitive and casual spheres of Pokemon Pokemon since their inception. As the name implies, the Weather Trio focuses on weather conditions that can occur in Pokemon battles, specifically rain and sun for Kyogre and Groudon respectively, and the neutralization of weather for Rayquaza. These three are also known as the Super Ancient Trio, thanks to them being super powerful and super old. Kyogre is the first of these three, and it is a water type. According to its dex entries, Kyogre expands the sea when it appears via torrential rainfall, and when it's not beefing with Groudon or destroying the world, it sleeps deep in undersea trenches. Kyogre seems to be vaguely inspired by the Leviathan of Hebrew mythology, as the sea-based monster would battle Behemoth, a land-based monster, and they would fight until the end of time, which is pretty much exactly what Kyogre and Groudon do. Kyogre also draws some inspiration from the Greek symbol for alpha and its markings, which are even more greatly emphasized in its primal reversion. Both Kyogre and Groudon were given primal reversions in the Hoenn remakes, which returns them to their original stronger states. These states cannot be manifested in the modern era due to the lack of primal energy available for transformation, so these two need to hold either the red or blue orb respectively in order to reach their full power. Primal Kyogre does not have too many differences from base Kyogre aside from being bigger and having an upgraded ability in Primordial Sea. This ability is almost identical to regular rain, except it causes all damaging fire type moves to fail, cannot be replaced by normal weather conditions, and will remain in effect as long as Kyogre is on the field. Groudon, even in its base form, is pretty much the exact opposite of Kyogre. It expands land masses when it appears due to the intense heat and droughts it creates, and sleeps within pools of magma when it rests. As we already stated with Kyogre, Groudon seems to be loosely based on Behemoth, or at least the myth containing its conflict with Leviathan. It also has markings on its body resembling a Greek letter, this one being Omega, which is once again more pronounced in its primal form. Primal Groudon comes with the unique ability Desolate Land, which is pretty much the same as Primordial Sea, but for the sun, meaning that damaging water type moves do not function while this weather condition is up, which is pretty good considering Primal Groudon gets a secondary typing of fire, giving it a 4 times weakness to its biggest op. One interesting tidbit about Groudon and Kyogre is that in the original Ruby and Sapphire, the dex entries of the games the legendaries weren't in spoke of them positively. Groudon's entry for Sapphire states that it was a savior to people who were suffering from terrible floods, and Kyogre's dex entry in Ruby says that it saved people who were suffering from droughts. Of course, their Emerald and Oras dex entries were not nearly as complimentary. Maybe Rayquaza slapped some sense into the writers of the Pokédex, because I get the feeling that no one knows these two better than the Green Noodle. Rayquaza has long been a super fan favorite thanks to its all-around cool design and undeniably sick shiny. Don't get me wrong, there are plenty of legendaries with cool shinies, but not many work as well as this black and red color scheme. Rayquaza is basically that friend that breaks up the fight when it comes to Groudon and Kyogre. It is said to live primarily in the ozone layer and has lived up there for hundreds of millions of years. This thing has been vibing in the outer atmosphere since there was an outer atmosphere. It seems the only reason it ever really comes down from the sky is to calm Groudon and Kyogre, and it does a very good job of that, as it is able to quell their rage with literally one cry. Like, it doesn't even have to throw hands or anything, it just has to be there. Rayquaza seems to be inspired by a mix of different dragons and birds from mythologies around the world. Its most direct inspiration is Quetzalcoatl, but it could also be inspired by the Ziz or the Lindworm. There's likely also a bit of inspiration from Japanese dragons as well, since it has 3 claws per hand, which is common among Japanese dragons. Then there's Mega Rayquaza. Mega Rayquaza is, as far as we know, the first Pokemon to ever Mega Evolve, doing so by channeling humanity's wish for salvation through the keystone of the leader of the Draconid people. The reason I say as far as we know is because the origins of Mega Evolution seem to shift with every game that involves Mega Evolution. First it was the ultimate weapon, then it was Mega Rayquaza, and now it might be related to Zygarde 2 in some way, so it's a bit hard to say what the truth actually is in this case. Regardless, it is still an incredibly strong Pokemon, and because of its method of Mega Evolution, it is the only Mega at this time that does not need to hold a Mega Stone to Mega Evolve, which is just broken on so many levels. It also gains a new ability as well, known as Delta Stream, which essentially removes the weaknesses of Flying-type Pokemon and overwrites any normal weather effects that appear on the field. Lastly, for Hoenn, we have 2 mythical Pokemon to talk about. First up is the Wishmaker Jirachi. Jirachi is very simple compared to the Weather Trio and the Pokemon that follow it. It basically wakes up once every 1,000 years to grant a wish, and then goes back to sleep sleep. Its main inspiration seems to be the concept of wishing upon a star, as well as the star festival Tanabata. Interestingly, Jirachi does have a signature move in Doom Desire, which is a really dark move name for an otherwise cute Pokemon. And finally, the last legendary of Hoenn, Deoxsys. Deoxsys is an extraterrestrial Pokemon that formed after an alien virus mutated into a Pokemon. Depending on the Dex entry, the cause of this mutation is different. Diamond and Pearl say the mutation happened after it fell to Earth, while others say it happened after exposure to a laser beam. Regardless of its origin, this Pokemon is really known for one thing: its forms, as Deoxsys was one of the first Pokemon to ever sport more than 2 highly different forms. Deoxsys has 4: Normal, Attack, Defense, and Speed. Each one, aside from Normal, provides a huge boost to each of its respective stats. Although at this point, these forms seem to be getting power crept, which is kind of insane. Interestingly, in Gen 3, each form has a different Pokédex entry due to the different forms only appearing in their designated games. Starting in Sinnoh though, the forms were changed by clicking on a meteorite, which greatly improved the Pokemon's flexibility. For whatever reason, Deoxsys and Rayquaza seem to have another unending beef. While this is likely because Rayquaza sees Deoxsys as a threat to its home of the ozone layer, it is kind of funny just how many Pokemon Rayquaza seems to have an issue with. It's like the strict babysitter left to look after Earth while Arceus is out for a pack of cigs. Deoxsys is obviously based on DNA and the double helix, but it is also likely based on viruses as well, due to their propensity to mutate and change rapidly, much like Deoxys's forms. Overall, it is a very cool Pokemon, and is among my favorite mythicals. Now though, we're moving into the Sinnoh region, which has a lot of legendaries, and I really like a lot of them. Unfortunately, our first Sinnoh legendary is not one of them. It's Uxie. Look, I don't hate Uxie, I just don't like it either. It's just kinda meh to me. Uxie is known as the being of knowledge, and when it first flew, it gave people the ability to solve problems. It also has the ability to steal memories from those who see it or those who do evil. The inspiration for Uxie are a bit harder to nail down though, as are the Lake Trios in general. They seem to be a mishmash of inspiration that is hard to decipher. Bulbapedia says the trio could be related to the high orders of angels, with Uxie representing cherubim, the 3 sacred treasures of Japan with Uxie representing Yada no Kagami, or a trio of Greek gods with Uxie representing Hestia. All 3 of these have some connection to knowledge, which is why it's suggested that they are connected to Uxie. Regardless, there is one very clear inspiration for Uxie, and that is pixies. Uxie, Pixie, I'm sure you see the connection. Next is Mesprit. Mesprit is the being of emotion, and when it flew for the first time, people learned the joy and sadness of living. And it has the ability to disrupt the emotions of opponents as well. But what Mesprit is probably best remembered for is being a roaming legendary for some reason, as if Sinnoh didn't already have enough of those. Mesprit is of course inspired by spirits and sprites, but it could also be inspired by Seraphim, Demeter, and Yasakami no Magatama, as these 3 all have a strong connection with emotion. And finally is Azelf. Azelf is the being of willpower. When it first flew, people gained determination, and according to Legends Arceus, it even has the ability to control the willpower of its adversaries. As for its inspirations, they're likely Hera from Greek mythology, thrones from Christianity, and the sacred treasure Kusanagi, as all 3 of these have a somewhat notable connection to willpower. But its most direct inspiration, much like the other 2, comes from its name, gnomes. You thought I was gonna say elves, didn't ya? But its Japanese name is a gnome, literally a gnome. I can't believe my guy is the Smurf of legendaries. Anyway, let's move on from the Lake Trio and talk about the main trio of the Sinnoh region, the Creation Trio. The 3 Pokemon Arceus created first, each born to govern a different aspect of the universe. Dialga was created to govern time. As long as its heart beats, time flows, and it has the ability to traverse time with no issue. Dialga also possesses an origin form, which is different from the primal reversions of the previous generations. The origin form returns Dialga to a form closer to Arceus that admittedly looks a bit dumb. Unlike primal reversion, there is no change to ability or strength for the origin form, despite the fact that the Pokédex entries implies that it is stronger. Low-key, I kinda hope that these forms get changed to primal reversions now that Megas are back, but I don't know that something like that is likely. Dialga also likely represents the solid state of matter, as it is part steel type and its unique item is the adamant orb, a word that used to be closely related to the hardness of diamond. Palkia, on the other hand, represents the expanse of space. As it breathes, space becomes more stable, and its control over not just space but also dimensions allows it to travel to wherever it wants, whenever it wants. Once again, its origin form is supposedly a form closer to Arceus, even if it is a choice. It also likely represents the liquid state of matter thanks to its water typing. Both Dialga and Palkia seem to be inspired by the legend of Izanami and Izagami, who created the islands of Japan by building a spear on a pillar, which is why the origin of the Sinnoh region is called Spear Pillar. And finally is Giratina. I know up to this point we've covered Pokemon in Pokedex order, but for Giratina it just makes more sense to keep it with its trio than it does to put it in its correct spot. Giratina has a fairly similar origin to Dialga and Palkia. Originally, it was created to govern an aspect of the universe, antimatter. However, for some reason, Giratina was a lot more violent than the others, so Arceus banished it to the Distortion World for its violence. Despite this, when the world and the universe itself were in danger of being destroyed by Cyrus, Giratina came to the aid of Dialga and Palkia, releasing them before taking Cyrus to the Distortion World with it. I think this kind of recontextualizes the violence Giratina might have participated in. It clearly cares about Arceus' universe to some extent, or it wouldn't have stopped Cyrus. So perhaps its violence was aimed at those who disrespected the universe, but it went too far. Or perhaps its intervention was a mercy for Cyrus, as the intervention of Arceus probably would not have had such an amicable end for the man. As for inspiration, Giratina seems to be inspired by fallen angels, as the stories of God banishing angels to hell are not all that different from the stories of Arceus banishing Giratina to the Distortion World. Additionally, the body parts of Giratina seem to be arranged into the Devil's Number, as its altered form has 6 legs, 6 spikes on its wings, and 6 little neck things, and its origin form has 6 wings, 6 spikes on its body, and 6 little neck things as well. And yes, we can just say it, Giratina's origin form does look way better than Dialga or Palkia's. This trio is undoubtedly one of my favorites, not just for their lore, but also for their designs. But I'm also just a bit of a Sinnoh fan in general, so I might be biased. Anyway, Sinnoh still has more legendaries, including possibly one of the most random legendaries of all time, Heatran. Like, why does this guy exist? Don't get me wrong, I don't mind Heatran, but he's not part of any other legendary group or duo or anything. Bro just kind of exists and is a very bizarre standalone legendary. Even its dex entry just makes it sound like a normal Pokemon. It dwells in volcanic caves, digging with its cross-like claws. Like, if you told me that was the dex entry for Excadrill or something, I would probably believe you. It is mentioned in Legends Arceus that it is formed from the magma within Mount Coronet, so maybe that's why it's legendary, but who knows. One legendary whose existence does make sense though is Regigigas, as he's basically introduced as the leader of the Regis. It was originally created to tow the continents themselves across the earth, but it was later imprisoned by people who feared its power, which is pretty valid if we're being honest. A Pokemon that can move an entire continent is incredibly powerful. I'd be afraid of that too. Much like the original 3 golems, Regigigas was likely inspired by the golems of Hebrew mythology, but the fact it got sealed away means it could also be inspired by the Titans of Greek mythology and their sealing of the Titans. The final potential inspiration I could find is Aomisunu, a demigod from Kunubiki mythology that had the strength to move large chunks of land on a rope. And the final Pokemon before we get into the mythicals is Cresselia. Cresselia is the lunar Pokemon, and as such has a close association to the moon. It's even found on Full Moon Island, as if that wasn't a clear enough connection. Interestingly though, it doesn't represent the full moon, but the quarter or crescent moon, which also makes sense, but still. It's said that people who hold Cresselia's feathers are guaranteed to have joyful dreams, and according to Legends Arceus, it resembles the heavenly maiden that created the Milky Way, which is a very interesting statement, but it's not mentioned anywhere else, so it's probably not actually that important in lore. But that description is very similar to Jainu, the Chinese goddess of the moon, which could be a strong inspiration for Cresselia. Cresselia also has a connection to Darkrai, who we'll talk about in a little bit. First though, we have to talk about Manaphy. Am I forgetting someone? Nah. Manaphy is an interesting mythical. According to its dex entry, Manaphy is highly affected by the environments it lives in, and it has a unique knack of bonding with any Pokemon. Its body is 80% water, which makes sense as it is based on sea angels. Although, considering humans are 70% water, being 80% water as a water type doesn't actually sound all that impressive. Its most defining trait, though, is being the only mythical Pokemon that can breed, as when it breeds with a Ditto, it produces a Phione. You didn't think I'd actually leave Phione out, did ya? The reason I've been teasing about forgetting Phione is because there's just not much to say about it. The Pokemon likes warm water and can float around with the sack on its head. That's pretty much all the information we have on it. Even by the standards of mythical Pokemon, it does feel pretty neglected. Next is another Pokemon that has been pretty heavily neglected, especially in recent years, Darkrai. It just hasn't been the same since the Dark Void nerf, man. Darkrai is the opposite of Cresselia, and as such, centers on nightmares. In fact, it even has a unique ability that does passive damage to sleeping Pokemon just to drive home the point. Interestingly though, Darkrai is not an evil Pokemon despite its highly edgy design and dark typing. Really, it only afflicts those near it with nightmares as a method of self-defense. Although this dex entry does make its actions in Black and White 2 a bit more confusing. As for inspiration, Darkrai seems to be most directly connected to Knocknitsa, an evil spirit in Slavic folklore that torments children in their sleep and slowly drains their life energy, which, again, kind of betrays the idea that it's not evil. Our penultimate mythical from Sinnoh is one of my personal favorites of the group. It's Shaymin. Shaymin is known to purify any areas of nature it resides in. It can always expel the toxins within its immediate radius. It also appears to act as a symbol of the changing seasons, not unlike Enamorus or the legendary birds. Shaymin has a secondary form known as Shaymin Sky. It is a form that is obtained by coming in close contact with the Gracidea flower. While in this form, Shaymin is much more playful and courageous, but it will revert back to its normal form if night falls or if it gets frozen. Although as a grass flying type, this thing is not getting frozen very often. It just gets KO'd. As for inspiration, there doesn't seem to be a very clear mythological one. It's just a grassy hedgehog or a grassy reindeer. And now we have the final and first legendary of Sinnoh, Arceus, the god of Pokemon, responsible for the creation of the universe and many of the Pokemon within it. We all know the myth at this point. First, there was nothing. Then, there was an egg that hatched into Arceus. Arceus would then form the creation trio as it shaped the universe with its 1,000 arms, which might be the unknown. After it was finished, it entered a deep slumber to rest and let the universe flourish and develop organically. Now, it can be found in the Halls of Origin, which reside above Spear Pillar. Its inspiration is very clearly gods in general, as well as the World Egg and perhaps Orpha's egg as well. Now let's move into Unova, which means we actually start with a mythical Pokemon for once, Victini. Victini is the victory Pokemon. Apparently, trainers with Victini will always win their matches, which is kind of crazy because that's not how it goes for me. It also has the ability to create infinite energy within its body, which it can then share with whoever it touches, which is kind of crazy as well. Like this one dude can fix our entire issue of carbon emissions. Moving on though, we have another legendary trio, kind of, the Swords of Justice. These three are said to protect Pokemon from both natural and human-made disasters. Their leader is Cobalion, who has been known to fight against human disasters specifically. It has a heart of steel, and while it is calm and composed, its iron glare can make almost any other Pokemon or person obey it. It is a natural-born leader and appears to be based on Athos from the Three Musketeers. Next is Terrakion, who protects Pokemon whose homes have been lost in wars. It is strong enough to break through walls with little issue and is based on Porthos from, again, the Three Musketeers. And finally is Verizon, who fights against humans to protect its friends. It is extremely fast and can confuse opponents with its movements. Virizion is based on Amaris from the Three Musketeers. All three of these guys work in tandem to protect Pokemon in different ways, but unfortunately that's kind of all we know about them. They're very neglected as far as legendary trios go, but they do get future Paradox forms in Scarlet and Violet. All of these forms are basically robotic versions of the modern variants, but their dex entries don't exactly reveal a ton of new information about them. It is also kind of sadly ironic that a trio focused based on protecting nature ended up getting remade as robots. The Swords of Justice do actually have a fourth member though, in the mythical Pokemon Keldeo. Keldeo was not originally a member of the Swords of Justice, but after being taken in by the trio and being taught how to fight, it quickly became their strongest member. It also has the Resolute form, which is supposed to be stronger, but nothing really changes about it aside from it learning Secret Sword, which is different from Sacred Sword as I am learning as I write this video. While in Resolute form, it becomes far faster and far stronger, gaining the ability to cut through anything with its new horn. It seems to be inspired by the kelp of Scottish cryptozoology, as well as D'Artagnan from the Three Musketeers. But as cool and unfortunately neglected as the Swords of Justice are, we have to move on, because it's time to talk about the genies. Who doesn't love these guys? Tornadus is the first one we have to talk about. Tornadus zooms around on a cloud at up to 200 miles per hour. It can create strong gusts of wind due to its speed and can expel huge gusts of wind from its tail as well. Individually, it is likely based on Fujin from Japanese mythology. Next is Thundurus, who is said to fly around firing off lightning bolts from its tail. These lightning bolts apparently have the ability to enrich the soil they strike. More notable about Thundurus though is that the legendary is in an unending beef with Thundurus, with the duo constantly fighting whenever they come in contact. Thundurus is the second Pokemon we've seen based on Raijin, the kami of lightning. And finally, we have Landorus. While this Pokemon might be seen as evil by competitive players, it's actually surprisingly helpful according to its dex entries, as lands that are visited by Landorus are granted hugely bountiful crops. Its dex entry says that this is done using the forces of wind and thunder, which seems to insinuate it can harness the energy created by Thundurus and Tornadus. In fact, Legends Arceus says that Landorus is the one who stops the other two from beefing. This genie seems to be based on Ikari Okami, a land deity of Japanese myth, but it could also be inspired by the Jin of the East Wind, Urus, as it is often seen with crops and dry wind. All three of the genies also have a secondary form known as Therian forms, which are based on the Chinese four symbols or auspicious beasts. Thundurus is the Azure Dragon, Tornadus is the Vermilion Bird, and Landorus represents the White Tiger. But wait, if there are four Chinese symbols, why are there only three genies? That is a great question, and the answer is because there is a fourth genie who was just introduced like a whole decade later in Legends Arceus. It's Enamorus. Enamorus is a lot more in line with Landorus, as its presence brings an end to winter, causing plant life to bud and grow across the region it lives in. It is likely based on Ugajin, a fertility goddess within Japanese mythology, and maybe more specifically Benzaiten. Its Therian form is, of course, based on the final Chinese auspicious beast, the Black Tortoise. We have just three legendaries left to cover in the Unova region before our next set of mythicals, and those are, of course, the box legendaries, Reshiram, Zekrom, and Kyurem. These three are often called the Tau Trio by fans due to their symbolic connection to Taoist iconography, but this is not the title the Pokemon Company uses formally. These three Pokemon likely come from one Pokemon known as the Single Dragon. See, the Unova region was originally founded by two brothers, one who wanted to search for truth and one who wanted to chase ideals. Both brothers were guarded and guided by a single dragon, and as the two brothers fought, the single dragon split itself into two, Reshiram, who sided with truth, and Zekrom, who sided with ideals. Reshiram is meant to represent Yang in the yin-yang circle in Taoism. Its fire is said to burn those who reject truth. Zekrom represents the yin side, and its electricity is said to destroy those who lose righteousness in their hearts. But there's a possibility this split of the dragon was not perfect. Depending on the sources you use, there could have been leftovers made in the process, which would take the form of Kyurem. The reason I say this might not be the case is due to an old legend in Lacusona Town, which states that Kyurem originates from a crashed meteor rather than being a part of the single dragon. Technically, both of these can be true simultaneously if we assume the entire single dragon is what crash landed in the meteor and not just Kyurem, but I feel like the pieces don't quite fit right for that to be true. Regardless of its origin, Kyurem has the ability to fuse with both Reshiram and Zekrom to become either white or black Kyurem respectively. This is done via the DNA splicers, and in both forms it essentially gains a bunch of signature moves and not much else. Not even Kyurem's typing changes, even though I always thought it did for some reason. Rather than representing yin or yang like its counterpoints, Kyurem actually represents Wuji, or the absence of yin and yang, more specifically the state of ultimate nothingness. I've been thinking about making a video that really dives into Kyurem like I did for Necrozma, so if that is something you want to see, be sure to let me know in the comments down below. For now though, we have to move on to the last two mythicals of the Unova region. region, Meloetta and Genesect. Meloetta is of course a music-based Pokemon, and it has the ability to control the feelings of those who hear its music. It has two forms, Aria, which is normal and psychic, and Pirouette, which is normal and fighting. It switches between these two forms using Relic Song, which is a pretty cool way to change forms. The idea here is that the Aria form is supposed to represent more of a singer. Specifically, I believe in opera singer, as the aria is a type of song that is instrumental to opera. Get it? Instrumental. Pretty good. Pirouette, on the other hand, is a ballet dancer, which we can deduce from the significance of pirouettes in ballet. One cool detail is that her hair is actually a music staff like you would find on sheet music, as it has 5 lines and 4 spaces, which is customary in the Western styles of music her forms are based on. Genesect, on the other hand, has one of the coolest origins in my opinion. It is a reanimated fossil Pokemon that has been upgraded by putting a cannon on its back. Part of this upgrade is that it can change the type of its signature move, Technoblast, depending on the different drive it holds. It can become electric, fire, ice, or water, but honestly, I think they should have just given it different forms like Rotom. Like, it's crazy that this little dude has more flexibility with its unique forms than a mythical. A lot of people suspect the ancient Pokemon that acted as the base for Genesect was Kabutops, due to their similarities in stature and posture, but we don't know exactly when Kabutops went extinct, so it's hard to say if this is true or not. Regardless, it's time to move on from the Unova region and talk about the Kalos legendaries, which are known as the Aura Trio. Yeah, these guys are actually the only legendaries in Gen 6 if you exclude the mythicals. Not sure exactly why these games were so low on legendaries, but Zygarde alone is like 4, so that kind of makes up for it. First though, we have to talk about Xerneas, and oh dear, does this one have a lot going on. Xerneas is a Pokemon that can share eternal life, which is done when the antlers on its head start to glow. In X, it is this power that allowed the ultimate weapon to fire and brought Floette back to life. Because Xerneas can command an unlimited amount of life energy, it could potentially create its own rogue mega evolution event similar to Anj. Obviously, Xerneas' most direct inspiration is Yggdrasil, the Tree of Life. I'm sure I don't need to tell you why. Yveltal, on the other hand, is a Pokemon that absorbs life energy and is generally connected to death and destruction. It needs to maintain a balance with Xerneas to keep the Kalos region stable, as too much life or too much death could lead to the deterioration of the ecosystem. When there's too much energy, Yveltal is generally the one to clean that up, but not much more is known about how it absorbs life energy. Unlike Xerneas, Yveltal doesn't seem to have a direct inspiration within mythology. It seems like the Morrigan is the closest, as it is an eagle that sits at the edge of the world. Also, in case it wasn't obvious, Yveltal is based on the letter Y and Xerneas is based on the letter X. So I'm sure you can guess what Zygarde is based on, right? Well, I can't, because this does not look like a Z to me. Where do we start with Zygarde? At its base, Zygarde is a collection of cells that are individually too weak to even be considered Pokemon. They rely on coalescing around a Zygarde core to combine their power, which grows after reaching certain thresholds. The first threshold is at 10%, which allows it to access the 10% form. 10% form is by far the weakest form, but it's still not that weak, as it can make super quick work out of opponents using its fangs. It's also pretty fast, as it can run at land speeds that exceed 60 miles per hour. Its real-life inspiration could be the wolf god Fenrir, who is one of Loki's children. The second threshold is at 50%, where Zygarde takes on a more serpentine form. It seems to be partially inspired by insects though, as its hexagonal eyes are reminiscent of compound eyes in the real world. 50% Zygarde is the form we originally see in X and Y, and it is at this point that Zygarde starts to monitor the ecosystem for those who might seek to destroy it. It's apparently hugely vicious and ruthless in this form, showing no mercy to those who threaten it. This form is likely based on another one of Loki's children, Jormungandr, which is a large serpent that encircles Earth, providing a connection to both its snake-like stature and its connection to Earth. 100% form is created when all of Zygarde is in one place, and it is even far stronger than the 50% form. It can overpower even Xerneas and Yveltal without too much issue, and the orifice on its chest can produce enough energy to eliminate almost anything. This form might be based on Hel, another child of Loki. However, I think it's far more likely that it is based on giant mechs, because, I mean, just look at it. It's also worth noting that in the video games, Zygarde Complete can only be accessed if 10% or 50% Zygarde fall below 50% HP, at which point it will automatically transform. This was likely done as a balancing mechanic, as having Complete Zygarde at 100% HP would have just been broken. I wish they'd thought a little bit more about said balancing mechanics when it comes to Mega Zygarde, because this thing is just so insane. Mega Zygarde is just Zygarde Complete, but with a laser cannon. It has the same amount of cells, but they have been reorganized to optimize its strength. We can see this pretty clearly as the wings that were once iconic for Zygarde Complete are now completely gone. Instead, many of them have been reallocated to this cannon that it uses. Low-key, I kinda think this form of Zygarde looks naked, but that's not important. Zygarde seems to only Mega Evolve in response to people's emotions, and it uses its immense power to calm and protect them. Inspirations for Mega Zygarde are still being largely worked out due to its newness, but some people have pointed out how it kind of looks like a tree or how its cannon is made out of wood, driving home its connection to the ecosystem. For a Pokemon that's gotten as much love as Zygarde, I feel like we still don't know that much about it. Like, we know what it does, but where did it come from? Why does it protect the ecosystem, and why is it so strong? This dude was zipping around Lumios for the entirety of Legends ZA, and I feel like we got so few answers as to what it actually is. But I digress, we have mythicals to talk about, starting with Diancie, aka knockoff Carbink. That's not even a joke, it's literally a mutated Carbink, albeit a stronger mutation. Diancie has the ability to create diamonds by creating a high amount of pressure between its hands, but where it really shines is its Mega, as it's the only mythical Pokemon with a Mega evolution at the time of recording. Besides that though, our information on Diancie is pretty limited, so let's move on to the most relevant mythical of Kalos, Hoopa. Hoopa's main shtick is being able to make wormholes, more specifically hyperspace holes, which are created with its rings. These can transport people and Pokemon to different dimensions whenever Hoopa desires, and it even seems to have its own secret dimension that it puts things in to keep them safe. However, Hoopa is actually much more powerful than just this little guy. He also has his unbound form, which was originally sealed away in the prison bottle because it was just too destructive. In this form, its rings can stretch miles in length, and at one point it appeared to move an entire castle in the Kalos region. This means that all the hoops we see in the Hoenn region are the work of Hoopa, and considering Hoopa appears to be important to the new Legends ZA DLC, I'd say we're about to learn a whole bunch more about this little guy. And finally, we have Volcanion. I don't know why, but I always just kind of forget about Volcanion. Its design always reminded me of a knockoff Heatran a bit, and I never really paid attention to it, which is unfortunate because it does have the very cool typing of water-fire. Volcanion seems to center around steam, which isn't all that surprising, but what is the sheer power Volcanion holds, as it can apparently blow away mountains when it expels its internal steam. The exact inspiration for Volcanion is once again not all that clear. It's most likely geysers or volcanic activity, but besides that, it's kind of hard to point down a deity or something like that. And with that, we've covered all the legendaries in Kalos, which means it's time to move to the Alola region. But I do have to address something. We will not be covering the Ultra Beasts in this video, nor the Paradox Pokemon aside from the ones that are also legendaries. These sets of Pokemon exist in a weird gray area where they're unique Pokemon but not classified as legendaries. Plus, this video is going to be long enough as is. If you really want me to make a similar video about the Ultra Beasts or Paradox Pokemon, let me know and I'll do it. For now though, we have to get into our first legendary of Alola, Type Null. Okay, I know it might sound crazy to call Type Null a legendary and not the Ultra Beasts, but I'm just trying to follow the Bulbapedia page. Type Null is one of the few normal type legendary Pokemon. It was originally created by the Aether Foundation in an attempt to essentially recreate Arceus as an Ultra Beast fighting life form. However, when the models were being programmed with the Arceus system, they all went insane and had to be put in these limiter helmets that we see them in. This greatly limits Type Null's power and makes them easier to control, but it is possible to free Type Null from these helmets via its evolution. It evolves via friendship and will become Silvally, another normal type Pokemon that actually has the ability Arceus System, which allows it to change its typing depending on the memory it holds, similar to Arceus and the plates. So it turns out all Type Null really needed was a little bit of love. I guess that really tells you how the Aether Foundation was treating these guys, huh? Both of these guys seem to be based on the concept of a chimera, as they are essentially a mishmash of a bunch of different body parts from different beasts. Although I don't recognize any of the body parts from Pokemon that we've seen so far. While I'm sure it's not the inspiration for Silvally, the name Silvally has always reminded me of Silicon Valley, the major tech hub in the United States. But considering how this Pokemon was made using advanced technology, maybe it's possible, but I don't think it's likely. Next, we have the Tapu Quartet. These four are the protectors of Alola, with each one protecting their own island. Tapu Koko is the protector of Melemele and is brimming with curiosity. Despite being a protector, Tapu Koko will not just help anyone. It can be quite fickle with those who it helps, but it does help those who absolutely need it. Tapu Koko can summon thunderclouds and it's pretty fast all around. Apparently it also has some anger management attachment problems because it gets mad very easily but will just as easily forget what made it angry. It is likely based on Kuka Ilimoku, one of the 4 major Hawaiian gods, which is often depicted as being covered in feathers. Tapu Lele is the protector of Akala Island, and it is apparently really cruel. All of its dex entries mention it being guiltlessly cruel, but none of them give examples or anything, which is a bit bizarre. The Pokemon is often described as nature incarnate for its apathetic nature, and its scales are able to heal those who touch it. But if you touch them too much, they can actually hurt you. It is likely inspired by Kani, another one of the big 4 Hawaiian gods, as Kani was the god that first gave life to humans, similar to how Tapu Lele can heal those who touch its scales. You know, between Tapu Koko's fickleness and Tapu Lele's cruelty, I'm starting to get the impression these guardians are not as benevolent as I once believed. But surely the next one will be, right? Well, probably not, because it's Tapu Bulu. Tapu Bulu is the guardian of Ula Ula Island, and its main power revolves around causing vegetation to grow. But don't be mistaken, it is still a very violent Pokemon. The most obvious example of this is the ruins of the Tapu village, which was destroyed by Tapu Bulu after humans built a thrifty Megamart on land that angered Tapu Bulu. To be fair, Tapu Bulu isn't outright angry or cruel like the first 2 seem to be. In fact, it doesn't even like fighting and tries to avoid it, but when it does fight or when it gets offended, it gets exceedingly violent. Its most clear inspiration is Alono, the Hawaiian god of agriculture. And finally is Tapu Fini, who is both feared and respected. A deep fog surrounds Tapu Fini at all times, and it is said that terrible calamities occasionally befall those who approach the Pokemon within the fog. Tapu Fini has the ability to control water, and is yet another legendary that can create pure water, getting rid of any uncleanliness. It apparently does not like humans and finds us generally disgusting thanks to our history, which totally valid, but it will still lend aid to those who are deemed worthy. The guardian of Pawnee Island is based on the final of the 4 major Hawaiian gods, Kanaloa, the god of the ocean. If one thing has been made clear by diving into the guardians of Alola, it's that they truly care about the region and not really the people that live there. This isn't super surprising, but I still wanted to make sure it was clear. Anyway, let's talk about Cosmog and Cosmoem. These 2 are weird, as they toe the line between legendary and ultra beast. Cosmog is said to be from an entirely different world, and its body is so light that even just a slight breeze can blow it around. For a long time, it was known as the child of the stars to the people of Alola. At level 43, it evolves into Cosmoem, meaning it is one of the few legendaries that actually have an evolution line. Cosmoem is essentially a chrysalis, as its body becomes a hard shell, while the Pokemon absorbs starlight and dust to fuel its next evolution. These 2 are obviously based on heavenly bodies, nebulas and black holes specifically. At level 53, they will evolve into either Solgaleo or Lunala depending on the game you have. These 2 are members of the Light Trio along with Necrozma, who we'll talk about in a second. Solgaleo is based on the sun and sunlight. It is said to live on another world, and that the light that radiates from its body is bright enough to make even the darkest of midnights seem like daytime. This is likely because its body is literally made of light. It doesn't just radiate light, it literally is light. Solgaleo also has the ability to open ultra wormholes at will and traverse ultra space. While its main inspiration is obviously the sun and stars in general, it is likely also inspired by the alchemical lion, which is a lion that devours the sun. Lunala, on the other hand, is inspired by the moon and moonlight. However, unlike Solgaleo, which is constantly radiating light, Lunala constantly absorbs it, creating the darkness of the new moon night even during the brightest of days. Interestingly though, it is still entirely comprised of light, just like Solgaleo. As for its inspiration, there's nothing quite as clear as Solgaleo, but there are a few potential ones. It could be based on Zamazatz, a Mayan bat god associated with night as well as death, or it could be inspired by its Papalat, an Aztec star demon and goddess. Death and night go hand in hand for many cultures, so nailing down one specific inspiration for Lunala is not really possible. And in case you didn't know, these 2 can reproduce in some manner to create Cosmog, but the exact process is unknown to us at this time and will likely always be. Despite how strong these 2 might sound, they're actually both prey to an even larger beast, Necrozma. Necrozma is not a beast by nature. In fact, for the vast majority of its existence, it was a pretty benevolent Pokemon. It existed essentially as the god of light and ultra space, opening ultra wormholes and going world to world as it saw fit, where it would then bless the worlds with its unending light. However, it eventually made its way to Ultra Megalopolis, where it was taken captive. The Ultra Megalopolins wanted to use Necrozma's life energy for themselves and tried to harvest it by force, but in the process permanently injured it, causing Necrozma to constantly leak light and exist in unending pain. This is why it exists in the base Necrozma form as we know it. Immediately after this incident, it took all the light from Ultra Megalopolis to try and regain its original body, but even all the light in Ultra Megalopolis wasn't enough, so it went to another world to do the same, and then another, and another, over and over again to try and stop the pain it was experiencing. One of the ways it can end this pain, at least temporarily, is to take control of Solgaleo or Lunala, as both beings are made of light and can therefore act as energy sources for Necrozma, but it seems to lose control of these two if it enters its true form, which cannot be maintained, causing it to once again return to its base injured form and repeat the cycle infinitely. It's actually one of the most tragic Pokemon out there in my opinion, but I don't want to get too much further into it as I already did an entire video on Necrozma, so if you want a more in-depth look at it, maybe check that out as well. For now though, we have to cover more mythicals, starting with Magearna. Built around 500 years ago, Magearna is a robot that has been brought to life via a soul heart, an artificial soul that gives Magearna the ability to understand human speech and feel emotions. Magearna technically has two forms, the form we see her in the modern day and the form with her original paint on it, which looks kinda like a Pokeball. If I can be so honest, I thought this was its shiny form until literally this second, but it turns out to be a whole separate form, which is kind of neat. As for its inspiration, it is obviously inspired by robots, but I think it is also inspired by the idea of Karakuki puppets as well. It always kind of reminds me of Diancie as well when I see it, but I think that's just a coincidence. Next is Zeraora. Zeraora is pretty underwhelming in my opinion. It's not bad, but much like Volcanion, I just find it kind of uninspiring. It can electrify its claws and use them to tear opponents apart. See, this is what I mean. That could just be a dex entry for like 50 different electric type Pokemon. It doesn't feel like it has any defining mythical qualities. It is supposedly super fast though, so I guess that's cool. As for inspiration, it seems to basically be the same as Raikou and Thundurus Therian. Maybe the Pokemon Company really is running out of ideas. A third electric cat legendary? Insane. And finally in Alola, we have Meltan and Melmetal, who are unique because they are the only mythicals capable of evolving. Melmetal is also the only mythical to get a Gigantamax form as well, where it has Onigiri for feet. Meltan basically sustains itself by eating and dissolving metal. They tend to live in groups when they first form, until one Meltan, which is stronger than the rest, essentially absorbs all the other ones and becomes Melmetal. Then, at the end of Melmetal's lifespan, it will rust and fall apart, with its body parts becoming more Meltans, which is a pretty cool life cycle if you ask me. Its inspiration is likely metal alloys and metals with low melting points like mercury or gallium. It's a pretty cool Pokemon, but we have to move into the Galar region, where we have another lot of legendary Pokemon to cover. First up are Zacian and Zamazenta. These two are the legendary Pokemon that saved Galar during its darkest day 3,000 years ago. Together they represent a sword and shield, with Zacian being the sword and Zamazenta representing the shield. Both of them have two forms, the base form which is somewhat strong but nothing special, and the crowned forms which are much stronger. In order to obtain the crowned forms, these two must be holding either the rusted sword or rusted shield respectively. In their crowned forms, they gain a fairly significant stat boost and also get unique abilities. Zacian's raises its attack stat upon entering battle, and Zamazenta raises its defense stat. Originally in Sword and Shield, this happened every time they entered battle, but this made Zacian so overpowered that they had to nerf it going into Scarlet and Violet. They also nerfed Zamazenta as well, even though it wasn't nearly as useful, which felt kind of unfair at the time, but on hindsight was probably good considering Zamazenta is pretty strong even after the nerf. These two are based on King Arthur's Sword and Shield, Excalibur and Windigbirthchur, or Pridwen. You might be wondering what it was that threatened Galar during its darkest day. Well, that would be our next legendary Pokemon, Eternatus. Eternatus originally arrived on Earth 20,000 years ago in a meteorite, but slumbered peacefully and silently for about 17,000 years. It wasn't until 3,000 years ago, which is around the same time the ultimate weapon was first fired in Kalos, that it awoke and plunged Galar into darkness by absorbing the energy of the lands via the core in its chest. Once it absorbs all the available energy, it will take on its Eternamax form, which is far stronger. It seems to be inspired by dragons just in general, and potentially also nuclear energy, with its seemingly infinite energy and the way it leaks energy into the land via Dynamax. While that is all the legendaries they put into the base games of Sword and Shield, there are still quite a few that were added in the DLC as as well, like Kubfu and Urshifu. Kubfu trains hard to attain perfection and can become a more focused fighter when it pulls at its hair. It has to work hard to train both its body and its mind before it can evolve. But not all Kubfu get the chance to evolve, as the only way for it to evolve is through the special scrolls Mustard has in his dojo. Using these scrolls, it can learn one of two moves which will determine which Urshifu it evolves into. If it reads the Scroll of Darkness, it will become Urshifu Single Strike, a fighting dark type with the unique move Wicked Blow. If it reads the Scroll of Waters, it will become Rapid Strike, a fighting water type with the unique move Surging Strikes. Both of these moves are incredibly good as they always crit, but what makes Urshifu a truly broken Pokemon is its unique ability Unseen Fist, which allows its attacks to go through Protect. It is truly one of the most broken Pokemon ever created, but somehow it's not even the most broken Pokemon introduced in Galar. Before we get into the horses though, we have to finish with the Regis. That's right, the final two Regis were introduced as recently as Sword and Shield, and they're Regieleki and Regidraco. Regieleki is most notable for having the highest speed stat of any Pokemon, as it sits at 200. It is a literal cluster of electrical energy, with the rings around its body helping to regulate and limit said energy. Much like the other Regis, Regieleki was originally formed by Regigigas before it was sealed away by people who started to fear the power it held. Regidraco, on the other hand, is made of crystallized draconic energy and supposedly has all the powers of every dragon-type Pokemon. It too was created by Regigigas before being sealed away. But besides that, we don't have much information on this Pokemon. We're getting to the point where the Pokemon we're talking about are still relatively new, meaning the information we have on them is limited. So if these descriptions seem to be getting shorter, that's because they probably are. The last trio of Pokemon introduced in Galar is Calyrex and its two horses, Glastrier and Spectrier. Calyrex is a bit of a wild Pokemon, like in a figurative sense. Apparently, it used to rule the entirety of Galar back in ancient times. It was known as the King of Bountiful Harvests. It can even see the future to an extent, as it once saved a Pokemon from a meteor that was going to kill it. However, it lost power over time, and as humans grew, their reliance on Calyrex dwindled, leading to it becoming nothing more than a fable. When at full power, Calyrex is capable of wielding the reins of power, an item that allows it to ride either Glastrier or Spectrier. Glastrier is pretty strong on its own, with the mask covering its face being 100 times as hard as diamonds. It can be belligerent and cold, both literally and figuratively. Spectrier dashes through the night, absorbing the life force of creatures around it. It senses its surroundings using all of its senses except sight. When these horses are ridden by their master, they gain a new ability, As One, which combines the abilities of the horses with the ability of Calyrex. The relationship for these three seems to be drawn from the legend of Brian Boru and the Puka, an old Irish legend where Brian tames a horse named Puka using a special bridle which contained the hair of the horse itself, much like the Reins of Unity. And the last Pokemon introduced in Galar is Zarude. Zarude lives in dense forests along with others of its kind. It is incredibly aggressive and many other Pokemon of the forest fear it. However, when vines are torn off Zarude, they help the plant life around it grow, so it's not like evil. Zarude also has a secondary form known as Zarude Dada, which is almost identical, except at one point it cared for a human child, which changed it to be less violent. Okay. We're almost there. Just one more region and we're done. This video has been a massive undertaking, so I hope you've all enjoyed it. And if you have watched all the way through up to this point, seriously, thank you. It really means a lot to me that you would give up over an hour of your day to watch this. Now, without further ado, let's get into Paldea and its legendaries. Right off the bat, we have a legendary quartet to cover, the Treasures of Ruin. The Treasures of Ruin originated from a region far to the east of Paldea and were brought across the land by a merchant who sold them to the king at the time, who was obsessed with riches. While the treasures were dormant when they arrived, over time they were awoken by the king's greed, and the quartet then went berserk, threatening the stability of the entire kingdom. They were later imprisoned in 4 shrines across the region and were sealed with stakes that must be removed from the ground before they can be reopened. The first is Woxian, the Tablets of Ruin. It drains the life force from vegetation and can cause entire forests to wither within seconds. It first manifested from the grudge of a person who was punished for writing the king's evil deeds upon the tablets. Next is the Sword of Ruin Xian Pao, who can control over 100 tons of snow at a time, causing massive avalanches. In classic cat fashion though, Wo-Xian just wants to play in the snow and is oblivious to the damage it has done. It is the embodiment of the hatred people have for the sword that now hangs from its mouth. Following Xian Pao is the Vessel of Ruin Ting Lu, whose head is so heavy it creates ravines 160 feet deep simply by smashing it into the ground. It is the embodiment of the fear that was poured into the vessel upon its head. And finally are the Beads of Ruin Qi Yu, which can control flames that burn at over 5,400 degrees Fahrenheit. It can swim through lava with no issue at all and melts the rocks and sand it passes. It is the embodiment of the envy that resides within the beads, as they were the root causes of multiple conflicts. The 4 treasures of ruin are based on the 4 perils of Chinese mythology: chaos incarnate, a gluttonous beast, a vicious tiger, and the recorder of evil deeds. The 4 perils have a lot more depth than just that though, and I can't really get into them in this video. Following the treasures of ruin, we have our final mascot legendaries, Koraidon and Miraidon. These two are pretty cool as they're essentially the same Pokemon at different points in their evolution. Koraidon is the ancient prehistoric ancestor of Cyclizar, and Miraidon is what it evolves into. Maybe. This information comes from the AI version of the Professor, but another version of the Professor suggests that these two are alternative versions of Cyclizar from entirely different timelines. Whichever one you choose to believe is up to you. One of the defining features of both these Pokemon is actually just how little we know about them, as basically all their Pokedex entries say is that we know nothing about them and they're really strong. One thing we do know though is that they're both mentioned in the Scarlet and Violet books, with Koraidon being mentioned as the Winged King and Miraidon being mentioned as the Iron Serpent. These two are of course very closely related to their respective Paradox Pokemon and both obviously take inspiration from motorcycles. Maybe a bit more than just inspiration if we're being honest. Our final legendary trio is unfortunately probably also the lamest one. Look, I'm not trying to be a hater, but the loyal 3 are just so boring to me. I'm sorry. They're considered the heroes of Kitakami and were worshipped after they protected the land from Ogerpon while under the control of Pecharunt. All 3 were once incredibly weak Pokemon, but their desire to improve their flaws led them all to Pecharunt, who helped them do just that. Okidogi was once weak, but thanks to Pecharunt's toxic chain, became strong. Munkidori was once dim-witted, but became intelligent. Pheasantipede was originally an ugly bird and became a beautiful one, both because of the mythical as well. Although I'm not sure I see the beauty that Pheasantipede desired. This whole trio is likely inspired by the Japanese folktale Momotaro, in which a boy named Momotaro is born within a peach and then travels with a dog, a monkey, and a pheasant to fight a bunch of ogres. I'm assuming I don't need to explain how this inspiration connects, so let's just move on to Ogerpon, who I just adore. What a queen. She loves mischief, she's curious, I mean, what's not to love? Ogerpon is one of the few Pokemon that gets new forms via terrestrialization. The form depends on the mask she is holding, and she has 4 different options at her disposal. The Teal mask, which is default, the Wellspring mask, which draws on the power of water and is balanced in both attacking and defending, the Hearthflame mask, which draws on the power of fire and makes her highly aggressive, and the Cornerstone mask, which draws on the power of stone and gives her excellent defenses. Upon terrestrialization, Ogerpon loses her grass typing and becomes the single type of the mask, unless she's wearing the Teal mask where grass is her only typing. Ogerpon is obviously inspired by Oni, a creature from Japanese folklore that is basically an ogre. She's specifically inspired by Oni of northeastern Japan, which makes sense as that is the region that Kitakami is based on. And the last legendary Pokemon is Terapagos, the originator of the terrestrial phenomena and a cute little super powerful turtle. Terapagos has 3 forms: the normal form, which it takes on outside of battle, the terrestrial form, which it takes on when it enters battle, and the stellar form, which it transforms into upon terrestrialization. Each of these 3 forms gets progressively stronger, with the stellar form being one of the few Pokemon with a base stat total in the 700s. Terapagos is a prehistoric Pokemon that got trapped underground as a result of earthquakes, which led people to believe it was extinct. These earthquakes and seismic shifts might have been self-inflicted, as its stellar form is incredibly powerful and we can see it causing deep cracks in the earth when it maintains this form. Stellar Terapagos is also the one that is written about in the Scarlet and Violet book, where it is described as a floating planet, which, like, valid description if we're being honest. This form has a unique ability that is kind of like Cloud9 but on steroids, as it will neutralize all weather effects and terrain effects when it is activated. Additionally, Terapagos does not suffer the drawbacks that are normally attributed related to the stellar terrestrialization, most likely because it is the one that invented stellar terrestrialization. As for inspiration, there are a number of different turtles in mythology, and I think they all play a part in Terapagos. First is the rainbow-shelled turtle from Japanese folklore. Another is Minogame, a turtle that lived for 10,000 years and grew a tail of seaweed similar to Terapagos' tail. And finally is the world turtle, a common idea found in many mythologies around the world. This one is of course closely related to the stellar form, as it is described multiple times as a planet. And that's all the legendaries, which means we have just one last mythical to cover, Pecharunt. It does feel kind of anticlimactic to end with Pecharunt, especially after Terapagos, but it is what it is. Pecharunt makes poisonous mochi and likes to feed them to people and Pokemon. Those who eat it are chained to its will. This poison is generated in its shell where it is then stored, and as we already stated, it is likely inspired by the story of Momotaro or potentially the Peaches of Immortality in Chinese mythology. And that's all of them. I've got nothing else to say. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next week.